Hey guys, welcome to Berry and Peps. I'm your host, Vali Chikuni. Today, I want to go through with you what Ben Shapiro had a debate, a dialogue with Alex O'Connor, and they were talking about, is religion bad or good for society? It's a very good debate, so let's just dive in so we can learn a thing or two about apologetics and just how to handle things like this. Okay, so here we go. All right.
Atheist delusion. Ben, could you sort of concisely, if you can, talk about what you mean by the atheist delusion?
Sure. So I should start off by saying I don't actually think that it's possible to prove the existence of God. I'm also not a believer that you can disprove the existence of God. I don't think that logical argumentation is going to get you there one way or another. And so I'm not going to try and do that with Alex today, because I think that if people would have been able to provide dispositive proofs, then people would believe them. And if people were able to provide dispositive proofs that God does not exist, then people would be more apt to believe those as well. What I think...
All right, so this is Ben Shapiro. He's Jewish. I don't understand why he would open up this dialogue that way. That, you know, there's no way that he can prove that God exists, and there's no way that he can disprove that God exists. Okay? Yes, he's not a Christian, he's a Jewish, but I take it that he does believe in Yahweh. Be that as it may, we are Christians, okay? If you're having a conversation with anybody, be it an atheist or whatsoever, that's not how you want to start a conversation, okay? You need to be starting with the presupposition that, yes, God does exist, okay? You need to be starting that God does exist. Anybody, whatever discussion you're having with anybody, trust and believe, everybody has presupposition. They also have their starting point. Our starting point is God, and our starting point is that God exists. Okay? How do we know that God exists? Creation testifies that God exists, and he has written a moral law on your heart and on my heart. The conscience bears witness that God exists, and God has revealed himself through the scriptures. Okay? Through the scriptures, you have the Bible, God has revealed himself, and God manifested in the flesh through the life of Jesus Christ. So the answer is yes, God does exist. You can use all these things to prove that God exists. So do not start with anything that, I cannot prove, no, he does exist, okay? What you cannot do is exhaust who God is. You can complain who he is, but you can never exhaust like, okay, this is everything that God is. But what he's revealed, it is more than sufficient for us to establish and to trust and believe that absolutely he does exist. But we continue.
Is an atheist delusion is that it is possible to live ideologically purely in a way that does not rely on fundamental faith principles. When I say faith principles, I'm not going to make the claim that those faith principles are direct from Sinai or that those faith principles require the New Testament, for example. I'm going to make the claim that there are a bunch of principles upon which we base ourselves that are external to what we know about nature and evolutionary biology, and that many of the things that Alex does in his daily life, for example, are going to be things that rely on principles that are external to a philosophy that would assume a lack of the supernatural, a lack of the extra natural. So some of those principles, for example, are free will. So every day we get up, we believe, virtually all of us, whether we say we believe it or not, we actually act in ways that betray the idea that we believe that we have control over our own actions, at least to a certain extent, and that control makes a difference in the world. And that's what gives us purpose. It's what allows us to wake up.
Okay, so it is true that even though people might not be beholding to any particular of faith, they are able to live their lives. They're able to do things that you and I are able to do. The reason why they are able to do those things is not because that you have to be a Christian in order for you to do these things. You are able to do those things because what? You're a human being. You are created in the image of God. You might not know the inner workings of the gospel, the inner workings of what it means, the triune nature of God. You might not know your theology, this, that, and the third. But because you are you are a human being. God has created, you are a moral human being. That's why you are able to know right and wrong. That's why you're able to see, okay, I need to do this, right? You're behaving in a certain way as a human being should. So yes, you're going to be living accordingly. Okay, you're not going to be living like as animals, right? You're going to live accordingly by virtue of you being a human being. So I hope that makes sense. But we'll continue.
and genetics in combination in some sort. The same thing is true of right and wrong, the idea that there is a right and there is a moral wrong that we can reason our way to. Another principle that I think that you're obviously very big on, it's something that you rely on all the time, your entire podcast is based on the idea of reason. These ideas do not exist in the context of a purely materialist atheist universe. Now, I'm not going to make the claim that I can prove that it's God who's behind those things, because one of the principles of faith belief is that I don't understand God. So
Okay, so this is also another problem that Ben is having, okay? Where are those things coming from? If somebody is behaving like a moral human being, right, it's because you have a moral law written on you, okay? There's a moral law. Where does the moral law come from? You cannot have a moral law without a moral law giver. So who is the moral law giver? The moral law giver is God, because everything has a starting point except God. So God is the one who has given us this moral law. That's why we follow it. Whether people subscribe to it or not, they live like that. Why? Because they're image bearers of God. So Ben is just talking like, oh, this is what I believe, but I cannot prove to you that God exists. This is what I believe, but I cannot prove to you who is this moral law giver is. Okay, so you're almost just leaving it out there. No, you don't have to leave it out there. Okay, ground your arguments in something. So far, fine, he's Jewish, right? The other guy is an atheist. So let's hear what his response is going to be. But we'll continue.
For people who don't believe in God, that's an easy way out, right? That's an easy way out for people like me, because I say, well, I don't have to explain the relationship between God and free will, because frankly, I don't fully understand God. But that's not really that's not really an open window. That's just part of pretty much all faith systems, is that if my mind were the mind of God, then I would either be God or God would not exist, one of the two things. So the idea that reason makes a difference in our lives, that we can reason our way to propositions, and that's more than just saying a few magic words and that's setting off a few neurons in somebody else's brain in a naturalistic way, that there actually is principles of truth, another concept that comes from the extra-natural world, that these principles exist. So far I've mentioned free will, good, right and wrong, reason, and truth, right? All things that we consider extremely key in our daily lives and that Alex considers key in what he does. It's, I assume, why you get up every morning, or at least why you feel you get up every morning. What gets you up to do your podcast? It's because you want to say things that you believe are reasonable, are going to convince people to act in a better way, or I assume not a worse.
So those are reasons, right? Where do those things come from? Right? The truth, where do those things come from? You cannot have reasons, you cannot have truth without God. So you need to have God in order for you to justify these things that, we live by. They just, these things cannot come from, quote unquote, the Big Bang, right? Just out of nothing. Okay, God is the one who spoke ex nihilo, out of nothing. He produced something, because that's God. You and I, we cannot do that. So, he's using good things over there, right? Real terminology, things that we use, but he's not grounding those things. What is the source of those things? Is what I want to know from Ben Shapiro. What is the source of those things? You need to be able to say, like, the source of those things is God. But he has already given where he stands in his opening statement, right? He believes in those things, but he cannot prove to you that God exists. He believes in those things, but he cannot prove to you how those things come about. We continue.
First way that get people to change their lives in some way in a self-motivated fashion that's not merely in a sort of Pavlovian response to circumstance and environment. So if I were going to talk about the atheist delusion, that's what I would suggest is the delusion, that an atheist can use terminology that is drawn from a world that is external to atheism for itself. And again, that's not an argument for God even. That's just an argument against atheism. Again, I think the arguments against God are fairly compelling, and I think the arguments against atheism are fairly compelling. This is one of the things that I've said to Sam Harris. And I think...
No, they're not. The arguments against God, they are not compelling, okay? If you think that they're compelling, then that's an issue. They are compelling by what standards, okay? You can never make those assertions. You can never make those arguments to begin with, because you have no... you have no grounding to even raise those objections if you do not believe that God exists. The fact that you are saying those things, you have already lost the premise where you're standing. Okay, so this is a problem. Like, this is why I love presupposition apologetics, because already when you're coming in, God exists. So that is your starting point. So if you're starting with God, you're home and dry. Okay, you're home and dry. You're not going to be giving and taking like, oh, I think these are good arguments. If you're saying that they are compelling, if you're saying that they are good arguments, my question to you, on what basis are those arguments compelling? On what basis are those arguments good arguments? So the thing, the plumb line, what you're going to be using to grade that those things are very compelling, where does that thing come from? Hello?
Think that the difference is that most people who believe in God have expressed doubts, and a lot of people who are atheists tend to be more religious in this way than many of the people who are God believers.
Well, something's...
Okay, so this is another mistake that people make, right? They think the opposite of faith is doubt. It's not. So just because somebody is doubting, that doesn't mean they don't have faith. Okay, you put your faith. Have mercy on those who doubt. Okay, snatch them out of the fire. People might have questions and everything. Like, no, you know what I'm saying? Like, if somebody is doubting, if somebody is questioning, there's nothing wrong in doubting. There's nothing wrong in questioning, right? There are answers. There's a reason people are just having doubts. Okay, understand why are they doubting. Give them the reason for the hope that is within you, so that they no longer doubt. We are standing on scriptures. We have a true foundation, which is the word of God. So we don't need to be scared whenever people are having these arguments. Okay, so yeah, but Ben is not a Christian, so he can be saying those things, but still, right? He is created the image of God, so the same standards apply to him, just like the other gentlemen. So we continue.
Certain. We don't do cold opens or soft starts here on the big conversation. Alex?
Well, I am glad to begin on a point of agreement with you, Ben, that yes, if there is no God, there is no free will. But I think that's because of the truth of the latter of those statements. That I suppose the biggest criticism that I made of you in a video response that I made.
By the way, at this point, this debate is over, okay? Because Alex has just admitted that, he does agree with Ben Shapiro that if we have free will, which means God does exist, right? You cannot have the other. You cannot have one without the other. So then let's just go home then. Why are we having this discussion?
To the atheist delusion, and this show does seem to have an extraordinary capacity for putting me face to face with people that I've been talking smack about online. So thanks again.
By the way, I should say it's a great video, and everybody should watch it if they haven't.
Well, I'm going to put that in the description. I think that glowing endorsement. The principal disagreement that I think I had with you, Ben, is that there was a subtle or not so subtle implication, in my view, that yes, with no God, there's no free will. But somehow having God can solve this problem. I mean, you said a moment ago that you don't think you can establish God's existence through reason alone, but assuming that you do believe in the existence of free will, you think it's a real thing that you have.
Yes.
And simultaneously saying that if there is no God, then free will makes no sense.
Yes.
That does read to me like an argument for God's existence, such that in order to either say that there is free will, in order to say that there is free will, one must believe in God. And that does strike me as an argument for God's existence.
I mean, to slightly curve that, or to kind of sand off the rough edges there, I would say that the argument I made is an argument for something extra natural.
Sure.
Now, you can call that God or not God, but the thing that I'm making the argument for is that you cannot get.
Why? Why can't we not call that God? Because Ben wants just to bring these arguments to Alex, right? But he doesn't want to hold himself that what I'm presenting is from God. I'm standing on this. He just wants to prove to Alex, like, okay, whatever else you say, you won't be able to prove that unless if there's something else outside you and I that exists. If you want to call that thing God, whatever else you want to call it, so be it. Like, no, that should not be the case. Okay, if it's just something else, how is that something else going to be able to give us a coherent worldview? It's going to give us the principles of how life works. Okay, if it's just nothing, Okay, God is not just nothing. Okay, God is spirit. So he's the one who is he's the author of life. He's the one who has designed us with reason, with thinking capacity. We're able to do these things. Why? Because we're image bearers. Yeah, I wasn't happy with just leaving it out there.
From a materialist Darwinist universe to free will. That is not possible. So I know that the way you solve that is that you say that there is no free will.
That's right.
And what I'm saying to you is you don't act that way.
I hear this all the time. People say, look, you may say there's no free will, but you don't act as though that's the case. I suppose that I'm just confused as to what it would look like for somebody to act as if they believe there was no free will. I mean, the very argument that there is no free will that I subscribe to, at least one of the various forms that it takes, is a sort of Schopenhauerian view that you can do as you will, you just can't will what you will. And that you are essentially just a biological machine reacting to its internal and evolutionary drives. That's what's happening. Now, call that nihilistic if you like, that's a separate question, but as to the question of how this would make one act, the idea that this might cause us to sort of lay around in bed all day or something, the very mechanism that I think is responsible for eliminating the possibility of free will, that is, the drives that make people do what they do, like I say, do exactly that. Make people do what they do. They make them get out of bed in the morning. Why do you get out of bed and go and make your breakfast if there's no free will? So you go and get breakfast because there's no free will and something is driving you to do that. That's outside of your control.
For sure. So to get back to the nihilism point, which you kind of put aside, so that means that this conversation is essentially worthless in any sort of...
Yes, that's a good point that Ben is bringing. If anything, you just have to be you have to appeal to a nihilism, okay? Like there's nothing else. We do have are human beings, do they have free will? Yes, human beings do have free will, okay? So we have to distinguish what do we mean when we're saying that human beings have free will, right? There is that we call human nature, right? You have a naturally will, okay? You have a human nature will. Just like you see, the animals, right? They have an animal nature, right? The animal instinct, whatever you want to call it. So because you have that free will, everything that you're going to be doing, you're going to do things accordingly to your nature. That's why when people are behaving like animals, right? We actually say that, oh, you know what, these people are behaving like animals. Like what happened in Israel, these people went barbaric, right? We're able to distinguish that. Why? Because we know as a human being, this is not the behavior of human being, okay? We do have free will in a sense that whatever you're doing because you actually want to do, right? You have a desire in your heart to do what you're doing. So you are going to do it. There's nothing that's making you do those things. We always say, oh, something made me to do these things, right? But that's just an scapegoat. So, for example, if you're driving, right? If a police officer stops you, what are you going to be saying? Like, oh, it wasn't me, officer. The car was just driving. Who's going to listen to you that? Nobody's going to take you serious. They'll be like, oh, no, here's your ticket. Okay? Because you were in control of the car. You could have driven according to the speed limit. You chose not to. So you definitely have free will in that regard. Okay? The difference is this idea of... what about God, right? The only free, only God is free. Human beings, we do have free naturally will. That's why our nature is a sinful nature. So our will is also attached to our sinful nature. That's what we are. But I will explain more in a little bit. Let's continue to watch.
Real sense. I mean, effectively, we were driven here by evolutionary biology and environment to have this conversation. Everybody who's watching this is driven by evolutionary biology and environment to have a particular reaction to that thing, and ever round the cycle goes. That seems like a very purposeless life. Maybe again, I'm drawing from a realm that is not evolutionarily biologically connected. The word purpose is really, teleology obviously has been taken out of the realm of science pretty thoroughly by atheists and by many people in the sciences, although I would argue that, again, most scientists speak in the realm of teleology literally all the time, and they're borrowing language from the language of teleology, even when they're describing functions of particular body parts, right? The heart pumps blood in order to keep you alive, right? They're constantly using language that's teleological in nature. Mm-hmm. The real question that I have, and this is what goes to the question that you were asking at the beginning, before the pre-question question, which was the good of religion to society, one of those goods is people believing that their free will matters and this actually is a useful thing. So I believe that it is deeply important for people in society to believe that they have the capacity to change themselves and to make different decisions than what biology would drive them to. So you say, well, it's biology that drives you to get out of bed in the morning, which is almost Calvinist in sort of the way that it's described, right? It's like you're predestined to get out of bed in the morning, so thus you get out of bed in the morning. But the reality is that we are constantly making decisions as though those decisions make a difference in the universe. And what social science actually does tend to show is that when people believe that they have control over their own actions, then when they believe that they're...
Okay, so as he, explaining there, right? Did you hear the Calvinism over there, right? You're predetermined, right? Be that as we're not going to go there. We'll be here all day. So this is essentially what these people are arguing, right? So Ben Shapiro does believe that you do have free will, okay? But he does not want to ground that free will in God. He has no problem, he doesn't want to ground it in God because he cannot prove that God exists. Alex does not believe that God exists, and he does not believe that we have free will. Okay, so this is what they are fighting. I don't know even how we ended up talking about free will and everything, because the debate was supposed, is religion good for society? Okay, but, these are learned mind. They're all over the place. So what do we have? What's going on over here? Okay, human beings do have free will. You're able to do everything, whatever else you're doing, but the will that you have free creaturely will. Okay, free creaturely will. Whatever you're doing, you're not a robot. You are doing exactly what you wanted to do. Now, what about God? How does God come in all this, right? God is sovereign. We live in time. God lives outside time. Because God is sovereign, everything that you're doing as willingly as you wanted to do is compatible with the will of God. It's compatible by God being sovereign, okay? So I do believe in compatibilism. So whatever else that is happening, okay, is compatible to that. Now, when you have somebody like this guy, to me, he seems to be hard determinism, meaning that everything that's happening to you is just happening, okay? You have no choice. There's nothing that you can do. It's just going to be happening, meaning that the events that the past events, to me, it even sounds like karma, so to speak, right? So like the past events is what's going to cause the future events, okay? So I don't know if what I'm saying over here is making sense, that all events are caused by past events. That's with hard determinism, okay? So the past events are causing these so-called future events, right? Such that everything that's occurring right now, there's nothing else that could occur but that, okay? So that's, you have hard determinism. Then you have people who do believe, libertarian free will, right? These people believe okay, humans are free. They are, they choose to do whatever they're choosing to do, okay? But now, I don't know how he ended up throwing in Calvinism in there. But, that's another subject for another day. But these two, this is what exactly that they're arguing about, okay? The reason why this always comes to salvation now, when it comes to salvation, okay? Oh, are you free to choose God? It always gets to that topic, okay? Because you have a free creaturely will that is actually sinful, okay? Because we do believe in the original sin from Adam. Because you possess that sinful nature, that sinful will that's in you, there is no way out of that you can be able to choose God. It is impossible, because that is contrary to your nature. That's why God himself has to change that sinful nature in you in order for you to be able to have a fellowship with him, okay? So he removes that stony heart and grants you a fresh heart, okay? That's when you become born again. Then you can be having those particular conversations. But this is not the conversation that these guys were having, right? They are discussing, okay, is religion good for society or bad society? Are we free to do this or we're not free to do this? So my answer, they ended up settling like some religion are good for society. My answer to me is, the question is, which religion are we talking about? Is religion good for society? Yes, religion is good for society. Which religion is good for society? Christianity is a good religion for society. That would be my answer. Why? Because God has revealed himself, the Christian God. Right? That's the one you want, because he's the one who created the heavens and the earth. He's the one who has given us moral. So if you're following those principles, that will actually bring a good, prosperous society. Okay? So it was a very good talk that they had, very interesting. Thought-provoking. Every time people are discussing this, are you free to do these things, right? We always think like, yes, we're free. But trust and believe that God is restraining evil even today. The things that we are capable of doing, most of the times we don't do it because of the consequences. If somebody cuts you off, you're driving. I mean, the things that are going on in your head, right? The only reason why you don't do it is why be like, you know what, I do this, I'll get arrested. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose this, therefore you're not going to do it. So there's so many things that, even in life, right, as bad as we can be, God is even restraining evil, because we can even do worse. That's why when we see other human beings doing those worse things, worse atrocities, we'll be like, man, those are animals, because there's no way a human being can do that. Yes. A sinful heart can do that, and then some. Okay, and then some. Okay, guys, that was the free will lesson that we had today. That's all that I had for you guys today. It was very fascinating discussion that they had. I like stuff like that. Okay, I like stuff like that. So let me know what you guys think about all this. Okay, all right, that is all that I had for you guys today. Be sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Until next time, remember, theology matters. Thank you.